Well, thank you. I'm very glad to be standing here and be presenting our paper called Modeling Bus Traffic for the Berlin SUMO Traffic scenario. So we already had the must and the HUTs, and now we have the best scenario today. And before I start, I want to give some credit to Timo Großmann, who couldn't be here today, who this work, his master thesis was a lot of the groundwork for this paper. And I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm a researcher at the Fraunhofer Focus Institute, situated also in Berlin. And with my colleagues, I work at actively shaping the networked world. I'll leave it at that. In 2022, I did my master thesis at the TU about traffic state estimation, and I have been in that topic ever since. And now for a quick personal note, how I actually got here. Almost exactly 15 years ago, I was doing my high school student internship here at this location, not traffic science, but at the Planetary Institute. And to give some maybe contextual link, I was getting here by bus every day. And what did we do at the Fraunhofer Focus Institute? We at the Smart Mobility Department work at solving or looking at all kinds of smart mobility and future mobility challenges and solutions, often revolving around automated or connected mobility. And we, as the group of simulation, look at these challenges within simulation. And what you need for a simulation, we already saw, is most often a model traffic scenario, which I already mentioned. We often use the Berlin SUMO Traffic scenario, short BEST, which we published previously in 2022. And it is comprised of 800 square kilometers areas with almost 2.25 million individual trips. And when we built this scenario, we didn't have any public transport in mind. So there's no additional infrastructure such as bus lanes, railways, or anything like that. However, with this little thing called climate change going on, there's an ever-increasing need, I would argue, for a modal shift away from fuel-powered vehicles. It doesn't have to be public transport, but it may be one solution. And so what we did is we set ourselves up with this challenge of integrating bus traffic into this calibrated traffic scenario, which from its OSM source has been heavily modified, as we heard previously. Junctions are always a problem with these scenarios. So we have the scenario and want to integrate bus traffic. And without having a big attention span, I would argue that we actually managed to integrate bus traffic into our scenario. On the right-hand side, you can see a short video at Zoologischer Garten in Berlin. This is, I think, fairly early, as there are only few vehicles. And on the left-hand side, in the blue table, the interesting column is the number of buses, where we were able to integrate about 25,700 bus trips, which is about 90% of buses that drive in one day in Berlin. And we did that while not worsening the traffic or the scenario. So we have about the same simulation duration. And also we only marginally increased teleports and emergency brakings. And for first intuition of how well we did this, in the green table, you can see that buses on average travel for longer distances and they travel slower. And inductively, they take more time for their trips, which is, I think, something that we would intuitively think that buses would do. And what does it mean to integrate 90% of bus traffic into Berlin, into our scenario? Here's a comparison of all bus routes on the left-hand side that are present in our data source that we used. And on the right-hand side in blue, the routes we were able to integrate, and in red the ones we weren't able to integrate. So we can see quite a large chunk has been able to be converted. Two things I want to mention here. Bus routes are often two routes for one line. So if one direction of a line is not wasn't able to be converted, it may be overshadowing the possibly integratable route. And the second thing I want to mention is there was a laser pointer, I think.
You have to turn that on the left side.
Perfect. That we did consider routes to be integrated even if they weren't completely in the bounds of the network. So you can at times see that bus routes are cut off, especially at the bounds of the network. So for example, this one usually goes a little bit further. All right, let's put this or look at the numbers some more. Out of 6,400 potential bus stops, we integrated 5,500. However, we also merged shared bus stops, which in the original data set were multiple stops, sometimes even at the same position, sometimes just 5 meters apart, and in reality they would be the same or serviced by the same buses. We were able to integrate 344 out of 386 bus routes. This ended up with these 25,700 bus trips. And what we also had to do to get to these numbers is do some manual network adjustment, which we all love, which here just the number is 1,300 edges were added. On the right-hand side at the pie chart, we tried to look at why we failed integrating bus routes. The first two, map matching failed and mismatched stops routes, are often issues in the data set. So for example, if the traces we used, and this is a spoiler, we used map matching to map them to the network, where for example in a tunnel where GPS traces are error prone, and we couldn't map them to the network, we just disregarded them. Similarly, sometimes the stops we found we weren't able to match the stops to the routes we found, and we even saw at times that stops were just way out of the route of a bus route. And then I think I have to hurry up a little bit already. There are some other issues. The incompleteness, we had a threshold that we wanted to have at least 50% of the bus route integrated. We can see that most of the bus routes are integrated by at least 95%. And the second evaluation, so this was on completeness, is I would say on correctness. We measured the punctuality using the on-time performance metric, which is calculated by dividing the buses that are on time by the number of all buses, and then we just multiply that by 100%. And there the on-time definition largely varies. We initially considered a delay of 60 seconds to be on time. The BVG, the Berlin public transport provider, actually considers 210 seconds, so 3.5 minutes to be on time, which is arguable. And with our strict definitions, we saw that in our scenario of all bus stops, on average, 74% of bus stops were served on time. And on average, 59% of bus lines serviced all their bus stops on time. This is also what you can see in the histogram here. You can see a large chunk is to the left of this 60 seconds threshold, but there are, of course, also bus lines that are to the right of it. And really quick, the right hand plot looks maybe a little bit messy at first, but there are two things I want to point out. So this is the average delay over time for the top 50 most serviced bus routes. And we can see that most of these routes fall during the entire day below that 60 seconds threshold. And what we can also observe is that there is at least a weak correlation between the day and evening peaks and delays, which is also something we experience in real life. And yeah, lastly, if you look at the BVG definition, we found that we are very close to their point of saying that 88% of their buses are on time. We achieved 92% of timeliness, which is just there. It's not better because we try to realistically model buses, but it's in the same neighborhood. So I have to hurry. How did we get there? So this is on the right-hand side. We will just look at that. We had our best scenario, which is defined by a configuration, a network, and many vehicle definitions in the form of routes. And to integrate bus traffic, we need 4 things. We need the extra infrastructure, so bus lanes. There are also maybe traffic lights, which we didn't consider here. And we need routes, we need schedules, and we need bus stops. Conveniently, routes and schedules can just be found in parallel with the vehicle routes, and the stops can be added on top of the network. Now adding bus lanes to an existing network proved to be problematic, and we didn't find a completely automatic solution for that. The next 2 slides I will just go quickly over. So different data sources we considered are of course OSM and GTFS, and we actually ended up using GTFS with a new map matching approach, which GTFS to SUMO to PT doesn't use. And for OSM we used the bus lanes. And this is just for completeness. I think most of you are familiar with these datas. And of course, we're not the first ones to try to integrate bus traffic or even public transport into SUMO. SUMO comes bundled with 2 scripts. There's the basic PT lines to flows and the aforementioned GTFS to PT. Unfortunately, since our network changed so much from its original OSM source, the input in the form of PT stops and PT line outputs that are generated by the OSM and by NetConvert couldn't be applied to our network. At least we tried and we didn't manage to do it. And other issues with GTFS to PT is that at the time of testing it was really slow. I think I saw in the changelog that this has been fixed at least a little by now. And also arguably the output is quite messy and really large. All right, so I talked about this new approach. We ended up using for our bus traffic only GTFS data. On the right-hand side, you can see our procedure, which has, as of yesterday, been published, but it's probably still a little bit messy at the very last bullet point. And what we do is we take the shapes from GTFS, which for the data set we used actually include GPS traces of all buses, which, as I mentioned, are sometimes erroneous. And we, instead of having the GTFS to PT approach, where every bus is basically defined singularly, we try to get a generalized schedule in the form of flows by using median frequencies of bus lines throughout the day. One thing that is good is that it's fast. So I tried this yesterday. It took 2 minutes without a very verbose output and 5 minutes if we generate a lot of maps. But we had some challenges. The first one is map matching. So we used Trace Mapper. We heard before about HMMs, which maybe be another approach. What we try to do is fix the output of Trace Mapper where it failed. So we saw often that junctions didn't get converted properly. So we would have these edges that are not part of a road. We try to fix this by using junctions as a basically common denominator. And then what we also saw is that TraceMapper would not really consider turning restrictions. So, and maybe it's not built to do that. Often buses wait at some edge, which is not really part of the bus route. And they would have a U-turn at the beginning or end. And we also just cut these situations off and reran TraceMapper. And the second issue or challenge we faced was network adjustments. One issue of integrating bus lanes is that connections get broken if you just add an additional lane. So initially we thought, we just do lane 0 is a bus lane now, and we add one. Unfortunately, this breaks connections at junctions a little bit. So as a proof of concept, Timo did this work for the Charlottenburg district. We did some strategic edges throughout the network. And we had to land at these 89% number, add a lot of just normal edges, especially unclassified OSM highway types, which didn't were considered at the beginning of the BEST, which very often are just usual residential streets, and maybe they are just marked that way. And so our approach was to get these OSM elements, which we could identify automatically using the Overpass API. And we took the OSM map, searched for the edges or the elements we need, converted them with netconvert, and then basically did some manual stitching of connections, which is a tedious task and probably, again, about 90% of the work. And this brings me also to the end, almost on time. What did we achieve? Well, I would say, successfully managed to integrate bus traffic into our maybe a little bit dated BEST scenario. We implemented this GitHub issue that we apply map matching to GTFS traces. We unfortunately didn't find a programmatic way to integrate bus lanes. I don't know if there is one, can be one. And some fixes is further investigation of networks. On the right-hand side, you can see some problems with the GPS traces. So the right picture is the Tiergarten tunnel, which just is faulty GPS traces because you're in a tunnel. For these situations, we could try and map OSM routes with just our approach. And now for the fun part, which starts after this paper, we want to actually use this scenario for myself traffic state estimation with buses and even perception, but also one use case could be mobile edge computing, where we use buses as mobile 5G edges. And of course, this scenario is published and even updated, and feel free to check it out. This also brings me to the end of my little talk. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm open for questions.